Pecha Kucha 146, Ultron Unbound in 2000 AD. I don't know if I've ever had a week where I was less inclined to actually make the Pecha Kucha. For a very brief time, I thought I would just not do it this week because Ultron Unbound is what I read this week, and it's no good. On top of having a full-time job. Right, so Ultron Unbound. This is exactly what I expect from an Avengers comic when I go to the library and pick it up for free. It's set in the 90s, and it lives and dies by that. It's not that it's necessarily bad, but it's so 90s, it's physically painful. This is exactly the kind of comic that caused the comic book boom. And crash. Emphasis on the crash. So it begins with Ultron being in prison, and he escapes, and as he's escaping, he's telling everybody how he's escaping. One of the biggest problems with this comic is the verbal diarrhea. Everybody explains what they're doing as they're doing it, a la Stan Lee, how to make comics the Marvel way. And and on top of talking about everything, it's so full of 90s dialogue. Like Hank Pym on this page specifically says, "What I have here in my hot little hand." And I don't know, it's just like a phrase that made me realize for the last, it couldn't have been 60 pages, I'd been reading 90s slang in a way that was never appropriate. What is Ultron actually doing in the plot? Destroying humanity by creating himself a female partner called War Toy. And it's even stupider than it sounds, and even she doesn't like the name. It's ridiculous. There's also an origin story for someone called the Raptor, who is basically the Hulk but worse. Oh god. It could go somewhere if this is the kind of character you could bring back now, like Daredevil when Frank Miller took over, and you could do something interesting with him, but no one did anything interesting with him there. The second part of this trade paperback is, 4 comics of the Vision. It must have been an attempt to break him off from the Avengers. And this is so 90s in a way that it doesn't hurt, but it's like you can tell what they were competing with at the time, and you can tell that Jim Lee was hot. Because, if you look at this double-page spread and you don't ask why is Spawn suddenly green, you must not know who Spawn is. The artwork in the Vision comics is I'd say better, but it also is so beholden to the 90s style, the Cubites and the Lees. It's ridiculous. Vision goes to New Orleans after experiencing emotions. He's a robot. He's not supposed to do that. He bumps into Ultron, who's become some kind of weird drunk. There's a great opportunity to reinvent the Vision and his cast to make them his own personal rogues gallery and all that stuff. But turning Ultron, who is supposed to be a genuine threat to all of humanity, if you flip back 50 pages in this comic, to a drunk who just is like such a half-assed cliche. It's explained why he's a derpy nobody, but that doesn't make it any better. And then the Vision has a mental breakdown because it's happening to robots all across, or androids all across the Marvel Universe, and he just thinks he's some half-assed Humphrey Bogart noir detective, which again is a great opportunity to reinvent the character, but it's film noir with none of the interesting stuff. And it turns out the bad guy who's making all these weird things happen is some guy I don't even remember the name of. There's a lot of stuff going on here that is just not interesting. And this is a page, I think, where I noticed that the colouring doesn't help either. I don't know if it's the technology of the time or if the colouring is lazy. It's probably more, it's the 90s. And all throughout the Vision comics, there's a lot of this ladies with the sideways hip stuff going on. Now, Cubit and Jim Lee can get away with it because they do understand anatomy and they push things only too far by certain degrees. This guy doesn't give a fuck. But, Friday evening I did manage to read something a bit more less 90s, 2000 AD. I shouldn't have even had time to read it, but there was a problem on the Underground on Friday. When I went home, the Central Line was fucked. So I was sitting on the platform reading this, and lo and behold, on the first page, Judge Dredd's been shot in the goddamn face, and he's in a hospital somewhere, some kind of illegal hospital, which he's going to inevitably shut down when he's recovered from being headshot. I don't know why they didn't put this on the cover, because this is exactly the kind of thing you put on a cover. Judge Dredd's down for the count. You will move volumes. Another interesting thing about the 4 pages of Judge Dredd in this book, in this actual comic, is that there's an ABC bot that's a member of the judges. I have no idea what his backstory is, but I'd actually like to know. And in 1 page, they've done more than that Ultron book could do to have interesting characters. Imagine that. As is 2000 AD's style, you've got all these different comics, so it's about 4 or 5 pages each. So I have no idea what's going on here, but it looks like it's kind of a War of the Worlds thing, where there are aliens on the planet running from other aliens on the planet. Presumably it's still Britain. I don't know. It doesn't seem bad. There is Judge Dredd at the start, and then there's Anderson's side division in the middle of this book. So it's a very bizarre situation where Judge Dredd is in this book twice. And he's obviously looking a lot better than he was at the start. That might raise questions about the continuity of how 2000 AD works. But, it's none of my business. And what this is about, it's got something to do with magic. These 2 chicks are in the woods and something magic. But what I find interesting about this is that the art style kind of makes me think what the Mystic Moors graphic novel could look like when he gets everything done and dusted. And Sad Clown of the Week is probably Kim Darroch, the former UK ambassador to the US, who basically, in confidential emails, called Donald Trump a twat, basically. And those emails got leaked. And Donald Trump was, doing what he always does when he's, awake. He was tweeting about this in very strong terms, saying he didn't want to work with Darroch. Darroch then resigned a couple of days later when he didn't get unanimous support from Britain. Boris Johnson specifically, in saying he's allowed to say what he thinks because that's his bloody job, and actually the person who needs to have his ass kicked is the person who leaked this. No sooner has Kim Darroch resigned than Trump U-turns and starts saying, "Oh, what a wonderful guy, I'm sad to see him go." And it's amazing how Trump is able to get away with, flip-flopping as a politician is supposed to be that thing that ends your career, but he's literally done it within the space of a week and no one cares. Because next week he's going to be starting a war with Iran, isn't he? So, god damn it. But yeah, that brings us to the end of Pecha Kucha 146, and I will see you next time.